So those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Mike. I'm known as McGilla NER on New England Riders. I'm one of the admins on there. And this is the second year that we've done these sessions with Ken in skill sessions. It's a great way to be able to talk about motorcycles, learn more about motorcycles, improve your skills, through the winter. And that's kind of what we're all about with NER. We're appreciative of Ken. If you don't know who Ken is an author, has written many motorcycle books, Motorcycling the Right Way, as well as some others. His website is ridinginthezone.com. Ken also teaches advanced parking lot classes, non-sport bike track days, private sessions, and so forth, both dirt and road. If you want to do that with him, you can reach out to Ken and do that.
Hey, everybody. It's another Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining us. We got a pretty good crowd here. It's awesome. Chris mentioned that my donate button doesn't work, and I was like, no, it works. And I just checked, it does not work. So I'll fix that after this meeting. I don't know what the heck's going on, but anyhow, so that's a place that if you want to shoot me a buck or two, you can do that on the website. It's ridinginthezone.com, and right in the menu it says donate. There's also an option of being a patron, although I've been kind of neglecting my patrons. So that's, just happens sometimes. Anyhow, I'll get that squared away if, tonight, if anybody's interested. So tonight's topic is cornering lines. And this is one of the big things that I cover in my street training. And also we talk about it a lot on the track days because and we'll talk about the difference, the similarities really, and of track cornering lines and street cornering lines. I'm going to jump right into sharing my screen, just describe what a cornering line is. It's your path of travel through a corner. Now in a car, you have pretty much one choice. You can move a little bit left and right, and I do in my car, my truck, because it just makes sense. Single track vehicle, we actually can really then utilize the full width of that lane to our advantage. Now, what we are showing here, this illustration is setting up for a right-hand turn. And you can see the advantage of just setting up for the visual benefit, line of sight. The red line shows the actual path of travel. What this does is it opens up the radius, makes it a larger radius. If we were to follow the inside of the corner, it'd be a very tight corner. Even if we were in the middle of the corner, we end up with a tighter radius than if we were to go outside toward the inside and exit toward the outside. Now there's a lot of nuance to this. So one thing that a lot of folks end up talking about when they see this is like, well, that's a racer's line, and that doesn't have any place on the street. That couldn't be further from the truth. Now, sure, it's a racer's line, and they use that line because it's efficient, and so it makes sense to be in the place that's going to allow you to get through the corner safest. And also, when you're on the racetrack, now you're talking about also getting through quickest. Well, that's not our goal on the street, but safety is. And so when we set up wide like this, we get that better angle of view, which is critical. It's really important on the street because you're looking for obviously oncoming vehicles or anything in the road, including surface hazards. So that's really key. So that's what a cornering line is, all right? Okay, so here's a illustration showing different types of corners. And they're not all the same in that your apex, and we talk about, let me go back, the apex is a critical part of this conversation because the apex is the innermost part of the turn. So it's somewhere in this area, and it's usually somewhere in the middle. Well, we also advocate for a delayed apex. So I would exaggerate this drawing even more and have the innermost part of the turn right over here, right as I coach it, as just before the beginning of the straightaway. So there's a straightaway. If you were to draw a perpendicular line here, the straightaway sort of begins about right there, and your apex is just before it, just before it. Big mistake, and we'll talk about it, is early apex. That's a big problem. And again, we'll talk about that in more detail in a little bit. Okay, so various types of corners you're going to handle differently. So here's, like we just looked at, was a 90 degree turn, really simple. The apex is going to be pretty much around the middle, just slightly toward the exit side of the apex and the middle part of the inside part of the turn. This is an increasing radius turn. This is one where you can apex earlier because the turn finishes quickly and it opens to a straightaway. So if you were to wait to go all the way around here, then you've kind of, you've missed, you don't need to. You're going to end up making a tight turn here. You can see that, and then making a straightaway longer. Now there's a benefit to that at some situations, but in here, we're just kind of illustrating that this is an option for you to apex earlier than a continuous or constant radius turn. Now, a decreasing radius turn, like you see on ramps or off ramps, that is where these are the most difficult, most dangerous turns. And it's really difficult to have the patience to, and the discipline to stay away from the apex until around the corner where you can see to the apex, to the exit, I'm sorry, and that you can safely start to roll on the gas. When we start talking about trail braking in a couple weeks, we've got that as one of our topics. The timing of when you release the brakes and then start to transition to the throttle, it correlates to a degree to where the apex is. Okay, so this illustration over here is just showing that sometimes we have stuff in the road and that we have to choose, do we go around the outside of that stuff or to the inside, assuming we have an escape route on the inside. And then you have to choose to do that. So you only do these cornering lines if it's safe to do so. So here's an example of when it's not necessarily safe to do so. If you're in an area, this was West Virginia, where the locals tend to, treat the yellow line, the center line, as an option or a suggestion. So you have to know that and understand that if you can't see around the corner and you set yourself up wide like this, which is exactly where you would want to be if you absolutely 100% knew that nobody was out there, then you would know to stay away from that.
And we have a question for you. It's kind of right around this actual topic, which is, when conditions permit, do you encourage taking an even wider start and slightly crossing the middle line to take the turn?
Cross the middle line? No. No. So I have a strict rule of never crossing the middle line. Now, when we talk a little bit from now, we're going to be talking about right-hand turn, left-hand turns where you have to even pay attention to your head and that it's not going to lean into the oncoming lane. But no, I'll go to the yellow line, like in this illustration here, this photo. But again, it's only when I know that it's safe to do so. Now, again, the farther out I can set up, the better, the more advantage I get. But you can't, trade, the ideal line for an unsafe situation. Here's an example, a photo of how your head approaches that center line, and you have to be aware of that. So when you are turning left, your tires need to be sort of pretty much located in the center of the lane. So, and unless again you're 100% sure that it's clear, that's when you can start to cheat a little bit and trim the inside of the corner. But like in this illustration here, this photo, that coming around the corner, this is probably in a corner that I just couldn't see quite around. So I'm going to stay away from that center line. And again, if there's nobody coming, then I'll go ahead and trim it in tight if it makes sense. If not, then I just stay in the middle. Remember, riding in the middle of the lane is the safest. You'll get home if you stay in the middle of the lane, but you're not utilizing a really important tool. One of the biggest tools and I'm going to go back to this illustration, is that when you do this right and you apex correctly toward the exit of the turn, this gets your bike pointed safely. That's a huge part of this technique, is that when you're doing this, red line here is suggesting that the exit is toward the left portion of the lane, close to the oncoming lane. Now, this would be only if you really knew that you could let the bike drift out like that. Now, if you turn in this way, it's all good. There's nothing in the road here. You can come in here. Now, at this point, you can look down the road and see if there's nobody coming. then you can go ahead and start to accelerate a little harder, which is going to bring the bike out, and you can utilize the full width of the lane there. If not, though, you keep it tight and you stay in the middle of the lane, right? But again, it's all about, in the end, being pointed safely. And we'll talk about, again, the early apex and how dangerous that really is. So here's, again, the left-hand turn. So this is this sort of turn, we're turning left. And this is what it looks like in a diagram when you have a truck coming the other way that you don't see. You can first off see the angle of view. That's going to be the advantage of being outside. You're going to see that truck sooner. But again, as I'm coming along, I'm going to slow down, and I'm still using a cornering line. I'm still opening the radius, but I'm just not coming in tight to the yellow line, to the oncoming lane. So this is absolutely still following the same principle, but you are using a wide delayed apex. So your apex is still around the corner. See, it's right around here, the closest part. Again, whether it's here or there, but it's in this area right here, but it's now far enough away that if I'm leaning, my head is still on my side of the road. Now remember that the faster you go, the more you lean, the more your head is going to be into the oncoming lane. So if you're really, going around a corner really fast and leaning, a lot, those tires absolutely need to be in the location, certainly the middle of the lane, that's going to allow you to safely, keep your head away from that oncoming lane. The same with right-hand turns. You can get too close to a mailbox or something, some sort of road furniture that's on the side of the road. So you have to be aware of that as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk now about multiple curves, and so we're talking just about the basics, about outside, inside, outside, getting the bike apexed, delayed the apex so that you're pointed safely. This photo shows a series of corners, sequential, and the importance of, here's Janine, my daughter, setting up wide. She's coming in. She's not going to trim very tight in here because it's going to open up. She's going to want to sort of work her way over to the right side here. She could have come in and gotten a little tighter in here, and then she would have had to have made sure that she didn't get near the center line between the two corners. So it makes sense to just stay a little wider here and get yourself set up to the middle of the lane, and then work your way over to the right part of the lane and then execute the next corner. And then it would be same thing. And that would be the left part of the lane and then apexing here and then continuing on down the road. This is an illustration of what, a good line is and a bad line, and how a bad line just compounds on itself and gets harder and more dangerous as you go. So what's the difference between these two? Well, it's the fact of, like, both of them apex pretty well right here, the blue bike and the red bike. So everything's good here, but they diverge here because the red rider didn't identify the fact that this corner is going to turn into a switchback. And that means that instead of the outside, inside, outside, which is what the red rider is doing, you want to have it be outside, inside, inside, and that becomes outside for your next corner. And then you're able to set up the next turn. But if you were the red rider, now you're going to be crowding yourself right here. Now you're apexing here before the corner, you're even at the corner. And then you struggle to get to stay in your lane. This is where crashes occur, is toward the exit side of the apex or the middle. Let me put it this way. Crashes don't happen at the beginning of turns. They don't typically happen in the middle of turns, unless, again, there's some surface hazard. They happen more toward the exit of the turn. And that's where this is here. It's because you go into a corner and everything's going fine. And then halfway around, you start to go, oh boy, I'm in trouble. And then you usually panic and you grab the brakes, hit the guardrail, or you just fail to lean more because you haven't leaned, not comfortable leaning any more than you do every day. You've not really tested yourself with your lean angle limit. And so you end up going off the road and getting into trouble. If the red rider had figured out early on that they were screwed up back here, they would have to slow down and they'd have to get on this blue line to recover. But there's a lot of momentum, especially if the faster you're going, the chances of you actually correcting in this area are rather low, unless you really come to you slow down a lot. Again, you've totally screwed this thing up. Now you're just trying to recover. But But you can see that even if the Red Rider manages to stay on the road here, they're in trouble because, again, unless they really slow down and get on that blue line, they're going to end up it's going to compound. It just gets worse and worse. Now, the Blue Rider, outside, inside, inside, is outside for the next corner. The apex, again, is around the corner right here, and then stays tight and stays wide, makes a nice quick turn in, and then there's the apex right there, just at the beginning of the straightaway.
Again, quick question for you. How much of the problem is a result of coming out of the first apex too fast?
Out of the first apex too fast? Well, hopefully, when you think about cornering basics, you slow down before a corner to a speed that you can safely begin to then roll on the gas about at the apex. You should be able to roll on the gas nice and gently. If you're in the corner and if you enter the corner too fast, that's where your problem begins. So if you end up coming in at the right speed, you're not likely to get on the gas too hard or too early if at the apex, not typically, unless you're really in a hurry, and then in which case you're accelerating at a point where you can then probably in this area get off the gas again. But again, it's not generally the case where as you come around here, you accelerate too hard and then get yourself to come out wide. This can happen, and it happens on the racetrack. If you get on the gas too early and too hard, it's going to be hard to stay on this blue line as you come out of this corner. But in general, by going into a corner too fast, everything goes downhill. And when people charge into corners, that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make, is to charge in, to bully yourself in. You come in always at a slower speed than you exit. So you go slow in, out with a grin, which is the saying that Eric Troe from Staying Safe has shared with me. And because otherwise, if you charge into that corner, then you're just fixing things. You're in panic mode. You've triggered all sorts of problems. So even on the racetrack, and actually even on the ice, Paul was just reminding me that I was charging into the corners too fast. And so I slowed it down. I was able to get more accurate in the corner, and then actually do better and get the bike pointed and accelerated to the next corner more efficiently and precisely. So always come in a little slower, come around the corner. As you can see the corner opening up a little bit, you start to accelerate. In this case here, I would be slow in this area. Right about here, I can see where I'm at. If I'm trail braking, I'm transitioning from brakes to throttle right in here. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of gas, but not a lot, because I will end up on this red line. So I'm going to give it positive throttle. Whoops. So positive throttle right in here, but then I'm going to go to neutral throttle pretty much in this area because I want the bike to turn. So I might even decelerate here and then start to accelerate again and then decelerate here. So whether I brake or not, I still want to load that front tire, and by decelerating as I turn. So decelerate, turn. Not accelerate, turn. That's, you're going to fight the motorcycle. So if the bike's not completely turned yet, you want to delay your throttle. Again, a little bit of throttle is good. You want to have drive, and you want to take the tension out of the chassis and out of the drivetrain. Put tension in the chassis and onto the drivetrain. So go ahead and you want to be picking up the throttle through here. You just have to do it. If you think of clicks like we talk about on the track days, we'll oftentimes talk about the throttle as a ratchet. So it might be just one click of throttle. Whereas if you were to accelerate out of a single corner, it might be click, 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 6 clicks. But if you come out of this corner here, it might just be like 1 click. And then you go down to 0 clicks right in here. And then you can accelerate up here. Now you might go to 3 clicks here and then 0 clicks here, and then start to click, click, click on your way out. So the timing and the intensity of your throttle is critical. So again, the reason people get into trouble is that they don't see the line in their head, their mind's eye, and that's something that I try to get folks to do on the street training. And so here, if you visualize this series of corners, these arrows are indicating the apexes, and see they're around the corner. This one here you can see easily, and then but the next one is along the yellow line, and then the white line, and then the yellow line. So if you put these together from an outside, inside, outside, the line ends up going along the yellow. You cut across your lane over to the white, and then you delay. You don't want to go right to the yellow. You want to delay because you want to have the bike pointed down the straightaway, right? And then you rinse and repeat. So this this part here, let's just look at this because it's easy to see. So if you go outside, you wait and you hook the bike around and you go to your apex so that you're pointed toward the middle of the road, the middle of the lane, right? And I don't need to go all the way to the white line, although oftentimes in a case like this, I do. I will hook it around enough that I hit the apex and then I stay along the white line and then I turn in and get to the yellow line. Again, as long as there's nobody coming the other way, right? We already covered that. So from now on, I mean, if you say to yourself, well, what if there's a car coming? There's not a car coming, all right? When I talk about this, this is the ideal situation. If there's a car coming, we just stay in the middle of the lane, or actually I would stay away from the car. So I might, if there was a car coming around this corner, I would just be away from the car. I'd stay in the middle lane, middle part of the lane over here, probably stay in the right part of the lane when I can, and just stay away from them. Once the car goes by, then I'm back on my cornering lines strategy again. This is, like I was saying before, this is the crash point. So this is actually was a fatality in Conway on Route 116 about, I don't know, 10 years ago. And you can see the marks right here. So this is almost the end of the corner. Where this guardrail ends, that's pretty much the end of the corner. So, and it sweeps around. So the rider was doing pretty well. And then this last little bit panicked and then dropped it, low-sided, and then hit the guardrail. It's because, partly because as they were coming around, they just weren't lined up properly. And in this case here, the apex is over here. And this person here was apexing way back here. And so if you were to do that, if you apex early, you have to turn a second time just to stay away from the guardrail. So the point about apexing later is it can't be overemphasized. So here's an example of a bad line. And again, the apex of this corner is right here. So this is the result of a early apex. And so now you can see the brake lights on and heading toward the oncoming lane. Thankfully, there's no car coming. But this rider wants to be all the way over here, pointed this way. Instead, he's pointed off into the oncoming lane. If you see yourself doing this, you've got to slow yourself down and you got to be more deliberate. You stay along the yellow line and you hook your bike around over to this apex that's right along just before the straightaway. There is a straightaway here. Even turns that look like little tight switchbacks, there's always a section of pavement that's actually could be called a straightaway. Even if it's like 10 feet deep, that's it. It's still a straightaway, and that still can help you locate your apex. So here's, those of you who've taken street training, I use some of these photos for our initial classroom. So here's an example of two riders. The rider in the red bike is doing an early apex. Now, this is a problem in that hopefully you can see what the likely trajectory is if this person here is going to have to just hug the yellow line all the way around. It has no real option. If he lets it go out much, he's going to have to get it back in to stay away from the guardrail. But his momentum is sending him toward the guardrail. So he's pointed toward the guardrail. Now, the blue bike, on the other hand, he started wide and he's coming around and he's going to be apexing right over here where he wants to be. And he's away from the guardrail. He's pointed safely. Again, no car coming. If there's a car coming, he stays in the middle of the lane. So this is a much better line and much safer than this person here. Now, I will point out the fact that we talked the talk about staggered formation in groups comes up a lot. And this could very well be the result of a rigid rule in this group of staggered formation, even in corners. That's why that's a bad idea. It's because this person here is stuck in a place where they just have to go around this corner a lot slower to just be safe and to stay in their lane. Now, understand also, even though he's not leaning a whole lot, his head's pretty close. It even looks like it might be over the yellow line right there. So that's an example of two ways of approaching this corner. And again, it would be out toward the white line in this case for a left-hand turn. Hook the bike around, and then there's your apex right over there. Why don't people do this out here? Because oftentimes there is a fear, an edge fear. I get this every once in a while with students, and to be afraid to be along the outside edge of the road is a problem. If you feel that way, get yourself, desensitized toward that, so that you feel comfortable being accurate along the outside edge of a road. It gets most spooky when you don't have a shoulder at all. So find a place that's actually a little bit scarier and get as close as you safely can to the outside edge of the road and just ride around the outside edge of the road if this is something that makes you nervous, because you want to be able to use the full width of your lane. And if you're afraid of this part of the road, that's going to be a real problem if you want to utilize this strategy. But also, if you have to ride out here for some reason, like a truck's coming around the corner and is halfway in your lane, and this is a place no man's land for you, it's going to give you have you resist going over there in that split second that you need to make that decision to go over there. So make sure that you sort of deal with that if this is a problem, and I do see it. So I wanted to bring it up. Let me see. I've got another. All right, so let's back up just a little bit. The big thing about this whole cornering line thing is that it's efficient in that you don't have to lean as much because you've opened your radius. That makes it safer in that you're not leaning so much and your tires aren't working so hard. Also, if you're not remember, lean angle is risk. So the less you lean, the less risk you have. So keep that in mind, and that's an advantage right there. The other one, especially for street riders, is the angle of view. So you get the better vision through the turn. On the racetrack, we don't really worry about vision in that we can see through the corners, or the racetrack doesn't change, and we go around the racetrack multiple times a session. And usually, a lot of racetracks they're fairly open. Palmer is not. Palmer's got a lot of blind turns, but again, it hasn't changed since the last time you were there. So it's less important that you set up wide for the reason of vision on the racetrack. See, what I want to do next is I want to actually show you a video on my YouTube channel, which pretty much it's me narrating going down Route 116. And it kind of just says everything we did, but does it in a dynamic way. So let's play that.
Riding the MT-07. All right, let's go set up wide here. Predicting where the apex is going to be. It's right there. Stay to the inside, which just becomes the outside of the next corner. I'm going to stay wide, make sure there's no cars coming. See, there's not. I can go over to the yellow line and move away from the truck. And I'm just going to hug the guardrail. I normally would have stayed wider, but the truck was there. So I just go through a little bit slower. So right here, I'm going to stay wide. I'm going to relax, drop my shoulder into the corner. Nobody's coming. Yellow line, decelerate, counter steer, move over toward the inside apex, just nice and tight to the guardrail. Again, set up for the next corner. Stay wide. This is a little bit longer sweeper. Stay wider a little longer. Wait for it. Wait for it. There's somebody coming. I'm going to stay away. And now I can go ahead and accelerate up the hill. Now, whenever there's a car coming the other direction on the left-hand turn, you've got to stay away from that yellow line. Remember, you are leaning into the oncoming lane. So it ends up being outside. And then instead of going toward the inside at the yellow line, you stay in the middle. And you pretty much just follow the middle of the lane all the way around the corner in that case. In the other situations, when there's no car coming, you can go outside and come in, trim the inside at the yellow line and make the corner less sharp and able to point you safely to the exit. Because that's really the advantage on the street. It gives you a better look around the corner. Here's a long sweeper. It's very tempting to cut in early. Stay wide, stay wide, stay wide, stay wide, stay wide. And now you can see the corner's ending. And no car coming, so I can just trim off to the apex. Same thing here. I'm going to the right. I don't have to worry about a car. There's nothing in the road, so I can go ahead and trim that. So inside becomes the outside of the next corner. Now, again, the other advantage of doing this is to get yourself pointed correctly down the straightaway. If you turn in too early, you're going to end up being pointed toward the oncoming lane.
So that sort of is it. It's very simple, but it's not not exactly easy, especially for folks who, you know, they don't really, that you've gotten a habit. You're going to just do what you normally do. If you start adopting this, though, not only are you going to ride safer and all, but it's way more engaging when you're cornering, so that you're not just following the, you know, the engineer's radius that they put into the road that you're on, and it feels much more I don't know, like a dance when you really hit this right. So outside, inside, outside, and then next corner, it's sequential. And then again, the big part about it is that it gets you pointed safely. So that delayed apex is going to have you come around the corner, and then you're pointed safely. You apex early, you're going to be pointed toward the oncoming lane or to the guardrail. So it takes discipline, it takes some good timing for your turn in. So make sure that you get yourself, you know, hooked around and then pointed down the road.
So please share your thoughts on the importance of how to approach road you've never been down before versus one you've been on well.
Yep. So that actually gets into our next week's topic, but I'll hit it now. You learn to read the road, and the road reading, seeing what you can't see. So all these angles, the painted line, the edge of the road, and then other things like the trees and all that are going to give you the information you need, so that if this was completely blocked off, your mind kind of finishes the picture, right? That's how you do that. You get really good at it, and you're correct most of the time if you just are more conscious of reading the road that way. But as far as the cornering lines go, it's still, this is the advantage, especially if I can't see around the corner. I want to be out here. So I want to get a good look around the corner. Remember, this is all dynamic. So the video, what was helpful about that is it showed how dynamic it was, and that every situation is a little different. So with this, as Janine is coming around the corner like this, and she's moving, the corner reveals itself more and more. So that if we are, say, coming down this road, and then this cliff was blocking the way, which it would for her, she can't see around this corner here, but she's going to be able to interpolate, you know, what's likely to happen as she gets closer. It will either confirm or confirm what her thought is about it, or she's going to have to make an adjustment. But again, the big look around the corner, that's again why you'd want to be all the way over toward the white line here, is not only to open up the radius, but it's to get a good look around the corner.
And some more questions. One is can you speak to a little bit about corrective measures that you can take if you're practicing these lines, you find yourself midway, you've made a mistake, or you misjudged the type of corner it is?
Yeah, don't do that. No, it really comes down to come into corners a little slower to a point where you really can't screw up. And if you screw up, it's more about like, oh, I'm in the not quite right position, but that the consequences are minimal. So when I'm going, like, say, let me just an anecdote, Tail of the Dragon, I was there in October with Carolyn on the back. Yeah, I've been on there before, but I don't remember any of the corners. And so I'm approaching it at a point where I know at a speed that I know I can handle it, even if it does something other than what I think it's going to do. But I'm consciously thinking and evaluating what I see, so that I have a pretty darn good chance of getting it right. I mean, I probably get it right 95% of the time. So let's talk about the 5% of the time. That's what I think the question's about. Well, that's 5% of the time. Again, I'm not in over my head. I just never get in over my head. So you come in a little slower. Things don't go quite right. All right, I'm just making a slight adjustment. And it's okay to make adjustments mid-corner. But the problem is that if the adjustments you make are abrupt, then you've got problems. And the only real reason you'd make an abrupt adjustment, like slow down abruptly or make a crazy steering input, is if you're panicky. And the reason typically you're panicky is because you're heading in there a little too fast, and faster for you, for your comfort level, or for your motorcycle. So, you know, I'm not somebody to say, you know, always slow down. That's not who I am. I like to, you know, rip it up and go for it. But it doesn't matter how fast you go, how skilled you are. You know, it's still that rule still applies. You have to be able to approach the corner at a speed that you can handle it, even if it doesn't do exactly what you think it's going to do. So an example is like decreasing radius turns, where you just cannot, you don't know that it's going to keep hooking around on itself. Well, you should have a fairly good idea that it could if you treat a corner that you really cannot figure out. You really have no idea. It's giving you all sorts of weird clues. Then you just stay wide. You stay wide as long as you can, as long as it makes sense. And it takes some discipline, but you stay wide, stay wide. It's going to be the safest thing to do. Now, of course, if in a case of this, if you turn in even a little too early, you're going to be headed toward the oncoming lane. So if you get this a little wrong and you turn in a little too soon, it's just, you can just don't accelerate anymore and just lean in a little bit more. If it's egregious, if it's really out of control, then you might have to brake in the middle of the corner. And that's something you want to avoid. So what happened in that case is that you just really didn't slow down, and you might have gotten on the gas a little too early or a little too hard. And that caused your bike to, and you apexed at too early. So that combination is what's going to cause you to really have to make a maneuver that could cause you trouble in this area here. So hopefully that answers your question.
A couple more questions, Ken. In a traffic situation, do you still use cornering lines? Oh,
well, how did I start this? I want to make sure that you understand. Only when it's safe to do so. And even in the video is that, you stay away from that center line, you stay away from that oncoming lane, unless you are 100% sure that there's nobody coming. If there's nobody coming, I'll get my tires right on that yellow line to set up for a right-hand turn. So there's nothing wrong with that. But only if, let me find the picture I'm looking for, only if you know that it's this one, that you know that nobody's coming. Janine would not be here if there was a truck coming around the corner here, because the truck would likely cross into our lane because it's such a tight turn. So when you're talking about traffic that way, because we're talking about cornering lines that are more typically out in more rural areas, even so, that brings up another point about, I use cornering lines even like, around town, because why would I go all the way around like this when I could trim it? Trim a corner whenever I can, whenever it's safe to do so. So hopefully that clarifies that.
Thanks, Ken. Another one, when you're taking a left-hand turn specifically, whether sharp or sweeper, where should your eyes be looking?
So vision is always going to be your first line of defense. So you're always, if you don't know what's going on, you really don't know where to put your motorcycle. So when, like mentioning about reading the road, it's all about vision. So I look at the edges of the road, I look at the camber, I look at the trees, I look at telephone poles, I look at all that stuff. So your vision has to be wide. However, as you get closer, your vision goes up and down. So it goes far away, middle distance as you need to see it. And then this diagram might be right in here. And then close if you have something in the road that you need a closer look at. So it's oftentimes it's not in just one spot. You get your eyes up as far as you can to gather the big picture so that you have an idea of what's coming up. But then your vision starts to narrow a bit and come closer when you need to sort of evaluate a little more carefully, say like exactly where you want to put your tires. And then again, it might come in a little closer and further down for a very brief moment to sort of get a closer look at a stain on the, as you're approaching on the pavement, just to make sure it's something that's not something you really need to make sure to avoid. So vision is constantly up, down, close, far. And as far as left and right, you're scanning to the exit of the turn as much as you can. You can make a mistake of looking too soon, too far. Like I say, sometimes when Janine once actually crashed on the racetrack once when she went overboard and looked too early across a turn. And what did her bike do? It hit the inside of the curb and she fell because she hit the curb. So it has to be almost like your eyes kind of ratchet through the turn as by the time she's here, she's now looking over in this area. Before she even approached it, she was scanning this whole scene. As she got closer, her vision starts to get a little bit. She looked at this little stain over here and her eyes came up, looked all the way over in here, and then they come back a bit. Her eyes are just constantly going through the landscape, forward, back, wide, narrow. Hopefully that answers that question. I tell you, this is the illustration of what the payback is. It's just so graceful when you get this right, and it's effortless. A lot of folks, when they're riding in really challenging roads, they struggle because they're really not sure where they should be. And they, the corner, this one's coming up quicker than they thought, and it's tighter than they thought. Well, a lot of that's about vision. So you get the full picture of what you're dealing with, and then you sort of compartmentalize each corner as you need to. Typically, like the faster you go, the farther ahead you have to look. We talked about that last week. So vision is speed related. So as you pick up your speed, that vision has to be picked up so that you can process where you're going to be. And the faster you go, you're going to be there a lot quicker than if you're going slower. So, and I'll also point out now, since we got this vision, this illustration here is that the red and the green is all about slowing and going. So this is where I'm decelerating. And if I'm trail braking, I'm on the brakes here. And right here, I'm transitioning and I am accelerating, even if it's a fairly tight distance between this corner and this corner. Now, it might only be one click of throttle, it might be 1.5, but I want to drive out of this corner and then I will slow again for this corner. So that bike, I'm not doing it dramatically, but I want that load to go on the rear tire and then on the front tire to help it turn. So load on the front tire helps the bike drop into the corner. As you pick up the throttle, it helps straighten the bike up. And then again, decelerate and brake helps the bike turn. So it's just a sequence that just ends up being just, if it's timed right and the timing and intensity of your slowing and going is right, the bike almost rides itself through here. It's awesome. Anybody else?
Carol had asked, whether this would be part of track day, and that's, I'm sure, a multifaceted answer, but why don't you go ahead and answer that?
That's a great question. As a matter of fact, I meant to bring it up but I didn't use my last slides. So track day, we end up talking very specifically about this, and it can be confusing in that when we're on a racetrack, we want everybody to be on the same line for safety. That's almost our primary goal, because as I said before, on the street, our primary goal is for safety, in that we want to see around the corner. On the racetrack, we don't need to see around the corner. We know what's around the corner. If there's anything dangerous around the corner, the flaggers are out there waving everybody down and slowing everybody down. So that's why riding the racetrack is the safest place you can ride. But on the street, we need to see around the corner. On the racetrack, the primary reason for staying on a line, we are all on one line, is that we're all in single file and we're not crisscrossing and making intersections. So that said, you're going to understand the benefit of cornering lines outside, inside, outside. It'll make total sense because of every corner is going to require you to do an outside, inside, and then exit to the outside. But even more so on the track days, that it sort of hones your skills about timing your slowing and going, so that if you get into a corner, and it doesn't matter racetrack or street, doesn't matter, that if you get on the gas a little too early, a little too hard, you're going to struggle to keep the bike in your lane in a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn either, just even on the road. So the same principles apply. A motorcycle is a motorcycle, whether it's on the racetrack or on the street. And so the racetrack is just an environment where it's more controlled, and which can be unnerving because you don't have we're used to street riders. We're used to having the painted lines and the restriction of a lane. And without that on the racetrack, it can be a little disorienting, but it's the same thing. So what we do on the racetrack is we use the full width of the pavement. So our lane is twice as wide as on the street, and that can be disorienting. But the lines, the whole thing about cornering lines are still the same. It's just that now we're on the track, we're going to end up talking even more about vision as it pertains to speed and precision, and then also being precise about your slowing and your going, and when you start to pick up the gas and how hard you pick up the gas. Because again, you pick up the gas too soon or too hard on the racetrack, same thing's going to happen to your bike. It's going to stand up maybe earlier and quicker than you expected or wanted. So it's great place to just repetition, put this skill into practice. Great question. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I had a Sportster 83, which is on the lighter side, and I just got a Road King literally like a month ago. So I only took it out for like a couple of quick rides. What can you tell me about a weight ratio when it comes to cornering?
Every bike's the same in that the physics are the same. So is there anything particular that you felt or that it makes you ask that question? Anything
Well,
particular?
first of all, it feels like, with the Road King, you're riding on a couch. So I love it too. I felt like the weight is a bit overwhelming. Again, I spent like 3 years on a Sportster, so that's a totally like uncharted territory for me. So on a couple occasions when I did a cornering on a Route 2, it felt like a little overwhelming, like the bike is pulling me to the side.
Okay. So yes, weight will always exacerbate any sort of apprehension in cornering. First thing I would look at for you is not the bike, it's your counter steering skills, your counter steering comfort, because the motorcycle, the weight itself it's obviously going to feel different, it's going to handle different, but the ability to get the bike from upright to turned, the technique is going to be the same. And with a heavier bike, your counter steering needs to be assertive, more assertive than on a bike that's lighter. And that would be a push-pull on a heavier bike. And the tighter the turn, the faster you go and the tighter the turn, the more force you're going to have to give it. So the handling of the bike is going to be different. So you're not imagining things, but the fact how to handle a bike that's, might not handle as crisply as your Sportster did, that's still, it just needs a little bit more coaxing.
Okay.
And that's counter steering. So if you have any questions about that, I've got, I think, a few videos on that, and I know I've got a bunch of articles. So you can always email me if you've got a question.
I'd love to. Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, you bet. By the way, on the parking lot course, we talk about this very specifically, and we work on that. So I do recommend that parking lot course. It's very popular, and it's low stress. We have a good time. It's pretty affordable, especially if you apply for the BMW MOA Foundation scholarship. Then it's very affordable. I mean, it's practically your gas is going to cost you more than the course at that point. So I really recommend it because we talk about cornering lines too as best we can in a parking lot setting. I set up a sort of a road course, and we talk about where you want that bike to be, and also when you decelerate and when you accelerate, to help the bike pretty much do the work, the throttle do the work and not you do the work. So that's another thing, Alex, about your bike is that if you get real good at the timing of your throttle and your braking, and you start to trail brake if you're not already, that's something that will also help the bike maneuver better. So there are techniques to help you overcome some of that weight.
Yeah, and I think I really would like to join if you can send me some more info in that regard. Again, I spent like 3 years on a Sportster, and that's like totally different ball game, like completely.
No, I understand. Yeah, I do. I totally understand. Yeah, I mean, the information's on ridinginthezone.com.
Okay.
At the top in the menu, it'll say rider training, and then it sends you to the training site, and it's all pretty seamless. And then you'll see the parking lot course. I've got 4 of them scheduled this year, actually 5, but one's a private one, it's full. But I have 4 others ready to go, and people are signing up for them. So. All right, anything else, Mike?
Tim, can you also speak about shifting your weight in the turn?
Yeah. Weight shifting is optional. I'll tell you that especially on the street. On the track, it's different because we need all the tools we can to get the bike to do what we want, and to do it with using as little traction as possible because we're using all the traction. On the street, we talk about this very specifically on track day, because this is where on the track is where you will start to be able to experience the benefits, because you'll be cornering a little bit faster than you typically, most people do on the street. And so that, if you're dragging your floorboards on the track, then we all talk about you getting your body in the proper position, and that's going to give you ground clearance. So by essentially just leaning into the corner, I mean, the simplest thing, and really on non-sport bike track day, we're talking to street riders. So all we really want you to do is lean into the turn. So why is that such a big deal? Because we're not used to it, and especially if we have a, like the Road King, we're kind of, the seat kind of sets us in one position, and we're just not used to moving like we would maybe a dance partner, which is how I like to think of it. But instead of going around the corner, just, in line with your bike fully, you're just going to go like that. And so that little bit of movement is enough to then coax the bike into the turn. And it also engages you with the riding more, just like the whole idea of using the cornering lines instead of riding up the middle of the road all the time, is that it engages you with the road and with your bike and your riding. And so then you're engaged physically as well as mentally with your riding. It's not, but it is optional. I mean, nobody that I know of has ever not made it home at the end of the day because they didn't have their body in the exact right position on the street. I do know it can happen on the track, but I'm talking about racers, not track, even normal track day riders, and definitely not non-sport bike people. So I encourage you very much to just get used to getting your body to the inside of the turn. When you're on the at the non-sport bike track day, a lot of people are like, well, I thought I was leaning, and then we have a photographer there, and he loads the photos online, a week later or so, and then people look at him and go, oh, that can't be me. I was leaning like crazy, and in reality, you were just leaning a little bit. Why is that? Is because you're just not used to it. So that's just something that you have to kind of untrain yourself to just be locked in your seat. So but that's my thing about riding position. There are other times when you're riding slow, riding position is way more important. Riding off-road, riding position is way more important. But normal street riding, lean with the bike. That's sort of the basic thing. It's like ride in the middle of the lane. It's the basic thing. You'll make it home at the end of the day. But if you want to really encourage and get the benefit of what your body can give the whole sequence of cornering, then lean toward the inside. A lot of times people say kiss the mirror, or put your chin to the mirror. That's a great way to think about it. And as you pick up your speed a little bit, you almost can't help it. But when I do this, I rock onto my inside sit bone. So I'm rocking from one cheek to the next, and that's all it needs to be. And again, looking through the turn is really important. Anything else, Mike?
There is not. I think we're good, Ken. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I'd ask you guys if you would join us next week for my favorite topic, which is reading the road. It's an interesting topic because we all go down the road and see the road, but reading the road is a whole different thing. So I hope you join us next week. We'll be here again 6:30. It'll be posted up in New England Riders as well as on Ken's Riding in the Zone. And thank you for joining us, and have a good night.
Next week, everybody.
Bye-bye, guys.